We're talking about migration
Evening,
here on Sky News. We've just seen a report from Adam Parsons where he's witnessed today migrants pouring onto dinghies in France and making that trip over to the UK. I mean, look, the Rwanda deterrent, it hasn't worked, has it?
Well, I think those images were very shocking, not least seeing small children being carried onto their boats by men and women, presumably their parents, hopefully their parents. It's quite clear that this has got to stop. It was equally shocking seeing French gendarmerie just standing on the coastline, not seeking to stop them. And I think the agreement that we had with the French worked very well in stopping the crossings over on lorries and heavy goods vehicles that happened up until about 2018. That has moved now through these organised criminal gangs into boat crossings, and this has to stop. I heard Alexander Downer, the former Australian High Commissioner, talking recently about how the Australians stopped this problem, and he was saying that the only effective way is a deterrent which requires asylum seekers to be processed offshore, which stops people from making those journeys. That's what happened in Australia. He was saying that whoever's in power in the UK will have to do something similar. We've got a plan. Rishi Sunak's plan utilises Rwanda. Many other countries in Europe are now looking at similar methodologies to try to provide an active deterrent. The Labour Party have voted 139 times against the Rwanda scheme.
You mentioned the French and the fact that there was a good relationship with the French where they helped the UK stop people crossing on lorries, and that seems to have broken down. So do you take responsibility for that, the Conservative government, then, the deterioration, the breakdown in goodwill with the French?
No, I don't think there's been a breakdown in goodwill. I think there's been a challenge of implementation. I mean, there is an agreement with France. The French have put more resources into it, and I'm not a migration Home Office expert, so I don't know the details of that agreement and why it doesn't appear.
It doesn't seem to be working, does it? They're just watching people get on boats.
Those images certainly look like it's not working, and I think we need to be talking to the French about what they can actually do to stop this. It may be that they need to introduce more domestic legislation in France. They're facing similar problems, of course, on the Mediterranean coast with massive increases in illegal immigration there. So they have a similar problem, and we, as is the case, across Mediterranean countries, we need to be working together to try to solve these problems.
OK, we'll be talking more at 9 o'clock with Yada Hakim about the kind of international efforts to tackle this issue. Let's talk about the campaign, shall we? Are you going to win the election?
I think the Prime Minister and all his ministerial team and candidates up and down the country are working their socks off to win their seats and hopefully for the Conservatives to secure a good result in this election.
It's not quite a direct answer to the question, is it?
Well, nobody knows, do we, Sophie? Until the poll closes and we start to get actual results, all we've got to go on are media reports from polls and polling organisations. But I've been knocking on doors in my former constituency and other constituencies, and I've found where I've been that the Conservative core vote is holding up. So I have more reason to be optimistic from the narrow and very anecdotal polling that I've been doing by knocking on doors, that the Conservative vote is not evaporating in the way that it would be suggested by if you'd only read media reports in the opinion polls.
Because I've been looking at the polls, as you'd expect, throughout the campaign very closely. I've also been watching the Conservatives, and I have to say, a lot of your colleagues, look at the line now seems to be stop Labour getting a super majority. Don't let Keir Starmer have a decade in power. The Prime Minister's in North Devon today. That's a seat with a 25,000 Conservative majority. I mean, it looks like you guys think it's all over.
No, the Prime Minister's been all over the place throughout this campaign. He's visiting Conservative-held seats and he's visiting other seats. So I don't think you can take a snapshot of a particular visit today as indicative that he's given up, because he hasn't given up. He's made it very clear. He's fighting every waking moment to try and retain both the Conservative government and Conservative candidates all over the country.
You're not standing at the election. You said it's because you turn 70 in the next Parliament, which is, fair enough. After 2 decades of serving your party, I'm interested to get a bit of perspective from you. Are you worried about the future of the Conservative Party? Because it does feel like, I guess, a public battle for the soul of the Conservative Party is taking place before our eyes. What would your advice be?
I think all political parties that are in office for a prolonged period, and remember, we've won 4 successive elections in a row. If we were to win this election, that in itself would be a record. All parties go through sort of waves of enthusiasm and support and waning of support. So it's no huge surprise that the opinion polls are suggesting that our support is declining somewhat at the moment. I think that my real concern about what's happening in this election is the sort of fragmentation of trust in politics across all parties. We have, polemicists standing up and saying all politicians are liars. We have leading front bench spokesmen on, I'm thinking particularly of many of the Labour Party members who can only seem to use the words chaos and liars now to describe their political opponents. This is very damaging for the body politic and respect in our political life from members of the public. If politicians themselves are calling each other by these very, derogatory terms. I've heard some of the Labour frontbenchers talking about the Conservatives setting fire, being the arsonists of this government. It's completely outrageous, this kind of language. And what it will lead to is, poor people not being interested in going into politics to be participating in that kind of contest. And we will therefore get lesser quality individuals standing for office. We'll get the public disenchanted and less likely to vote for those individuals. And that way, I think we head into a really uncertain future without confidence that we live in a good political system. That way, ultimately, authoritarianism lies, and that would be devastating for this country.